Hello Kinder, it is tendedtadpolebiz here, and I've been getting asked a lot recently during some of my live streams how I made my city. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I have my world tour linked below. I basically have a city that has over 50 towers in it, where I just took pretty much one entire island or continent, whatever you want to call it, in Minecraft, and I filled the whole thing with towers and just made a giant city out of it. And so, in case you missed the live stream, or in case you're new to my channel, or if you just want to know how to make a city, today I'm going to break down sort of the steps that I used, or like a general plan that I had for when I make cities. So, let's get right into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is plan out your buildings and plan out the city. Now, when I say plan out the city, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to know exactly what building is going to go where, because clearly that's a lot. If you do know exactly where everything is going to go, I mean, better luck to you. You're probably going to have a great city, but more likely than not, you're probably like me, and you probably have a handful of ideas. I know when I made mine, I had like one or two. You have an idea of some things that you want to make, but you're going to fill it in as you go. So like in my personal experience, I built the castle as the center of what I wanted, and then I decided I wanted a cool skyline around me, and so I had some general ideas of some towers that I wanted to make, but it was really patchwork. Whatever your aspirations for your city are, I just say have an idea of the main builds that you want. So like if you want a center court in the middle, build your city around that. Whatever you want, just know what you want for the core of it. It can be as small as I want to have a house next to my farm, or it can be as big as like I had in my city. I wanted one specific tower next to another specific tower. Whatever your plan is, just have an idea of what you want where and somewhere where you can actually start off on the towers. And then once you get that going, it'll be up and running in no time. Next up, you've got to build infrastructure. I know this may sound tedious, and it probably doesn't sound like it's going to be as much fun as some of your other builds, but trust me when I say that building the right infrastructure is what will make or break your city. Now, this means adding roads, bridges, landscaping, whatever you need to traverse the city once it's finally in place with all of its buildings. You want to make sure you do this early and often. Because if you try and put in some rows after the fact, it's going to be just some weird web of intertwined nonsense that's going to make it harder to actually get around in your city. Now, I understand that when I say this, mine is completely flat, but don't feel like you necessarily have to do that. I made mine flat because it made sense for mine, right? It made it easier to build the actual buildings that I wanted to put into place because I knew I wanted the entire island that I was starting on to be one big city. But more than likely, you're not just putting 50 towers in one area. At most, you may have a handful, and you're going to have a bunch of buildings that actually make sense for your world. So I would say, if you're not going to follow the same path as me, make sure yours is at least relatively flat, right? So this means you don't want to have any buildings hanging off the side of a cliff or being supported by a couple of dirt blocks. I would say, try and keep it in a relatively same y coordinate. Try and keep it 10 or less for the majority of it, and make sure you don't jump up more than 3 at a time, just because it's going to look a bit weird if you do that. And it'll be really hilly, and it probably doesn't work well for your city. Now, going off of this, you also want to make sure that when you are connecting two different places with these infrastructure, you keep it consistent. So, for your roads, for example, make sure you create a plan and you stick to it. Because if you have, in my case, I had some friends who joined the world who had their own road designs. That's cool for their world, but if I have multiple road designs going through one city, it can be confusing to try and figure out where the road is actually going to. So I would say, go into a creative world, test around a little bit with something you like. In my case, I really like putting gravel down, surrounded by a couple of slabs of stone or cobblestone. But you don't necessarily have to do that. Go into creative world, try some new things out, and find a road that you think works well for you. After all, this is your city, so you're the one who has to like it. So go and experiment a little bit, and it'll add some flair to your world. Going off that same token, do the same thing for your bridges. As tempting as it may be, and as much as you probably want to make a tiny, one-wide wooden plank walkway that's connecting two sides of a river, if you add some decor to it, it's going to make it so much more interesting and help spruce up your city. And I often find myself looking up designs or trying new things in a creative world just to try and find out what kind of things I would like, because bridges are a bit tough to do. Whatever you do, just make sure that you plan out how you'll maneuver around the city before you actually start making the buildings, because you don't want to have a few builds in place and then realize you can't connect them with your roads and bridges. Now that you've got your ideas and you have the infrastructure to support the buildings that you want, go ahead and start building. But pace yourself. I know this may sound really vague, but it's kind of meant to be open-ended because it's really going to vary from person to person. And so what I mean by that is make those crucial buildings that made you want to start your city in the first place, and then cool it for a little bit. For me, in my own world, I had two towers that I really wanted to make, and those were Tadpole Tower and my clan's tower, WCPM Tower. They were the two coolest ideas that I had going into it, and once they were built, I took some time to reflect on it. If you continuously make new buildings, firstly, you're going to run out of resources, but more importantly, you're going to run out of ideas. Now, this obviously depends on person to person and how many builds you really wanted to make, but I would say make just a few buildings at a time, and then always take some time to reflect upon what you've already made. Maybe like me, this will give you some time to decorate the buildings or help you to come up with new ideas for what are going to surround these core buildings. And even if you're not and you just want to continuously build and you have a lot of ideas, this break period will still give you time to keep you from getting burnt out on making things, as well as fill your chest back up from all the loot that you inevitably lose from making these, and it'll help you to prepare for your next project. Now that you've got a few buildings in place, make sure you finish them and actually decorate them. Inevitably, you're going to make a few buildings that are just going to get away from you, and you're going to forget to finish them over time. And at some point, hopefully before you get to the 50 towers that I have, you actually take the time to go back and decorate the ones you have. This doesn't mean you have to furnish absolutely every floor of every building with all the beds and tables and whatnot that you would need for a big old city, but maybe adding some carpeting or some cool lighting elements, or just something that's unique to that building so that it doesn't look completely empty and you have a ghost city like I do. If you don't do this, again, I made this mistake, you're going to end up with just a ghost town full of empty rooms that mean nothing to you and really have no purpose. So if you really want something that's meaningful as well as useful, make sure you actually add this flair to your buildings that you make. Finally, once you have the buildings that you really wanted in place and you think you've decorated them to the best of their ability, keep adding more. I feel like I say this all the time, but a city is never really something that you fully finish unless you literally just run out of room to put the buildings. Like with my personal city, even after I finished the towers that I wanted, I kept and keep adding more and more to them because I just think, different things will look nice around them. So long as you can keep coming up with nice ideas for things to put around the building, I don't think you ever really finish it. And it continues to look more and more amazing the more that you add. Now with that, also don't think you need to limit yourself to the confines of one particular area. Some of my favorite areas in my world are like my running away area, where I branched out and just started building in a random spot just to see what would happen. If you sprawl out where you have things that you have them, it makes it a lot easier to just go from one place to another, just getting new ideas, because I get it, if you're in one spot building over and over again, it sort of gets stale and you forget how to add new things. So if that's what it takes, I'd say branching out is a great way to keep doing it. At the end of the day, this really is all up to you though. So however you end up doing it, whether you take my advice of spreading out, or if you do just want to do it all in one place, make sure it's something that you like, because if it's something that you're just doing just so that you can say you have a city, it's not going to turn out the way you want it to. So at the end of the day, just do things that you think look nice, and you're going to have a great city in no time. Well, there you guys have it. These are sort of my tips and tricks on how I made at least my city. Obviously, it's going to differ from person to person. That's why it's a little bit more open-ended than some other how-to videos that I would make, because I think you really do need to put your own personality into this. And if I just told you how to do a cookie cutter, it wouldn't work that great. Now, if you do want some more specifics, especially on how to make an actual tower, I have already done a video about that. I will link it down below. That way you can just sort of get a general idea on how you can make those if you do want to put those in your city. As well as that, if you guys think there's anything that I missed or there's something that would probably be done better a different way, please let me know. I at least made my city just the way I did, and these are the steps I took, but I'm sure there's better ways to do each and every part of that. So, yeah. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Tschüss, Kinder.